What up, Schroit Nation? Welcome to Schroit Worldwide. My name is Mint Miracle, and today I'm going to be giving a Schroit tutorial. I'm going to be going over BeepBox, which is the website that most Schroiters use to make their music. It's much easier to use than a lot of other music software. Plus, it's free. You just gotta go to beepbox.co. Easy peasy. I'll put a link in the description. And the point of this video is mostly just going to be about how to set up BeepBox, how to use it, and maybe a couple of Schroit songwriting techniques that a lot of Schroiters like to use, or at least that I like to use. First thing you're going to want to do in BeepBox, go to Preferences, check Show Piano Keys, check Highlight Fifth Note, or Highlight Fifth of Song Key, Show Octave Scroll Bar, and Show Notes from All Channels. Once you've got this, it gives you a lot more possibilities for what you can do in BeepBox. So now I can scroll around to increase the pitch of whatever I'm playing. So I can, if I want to have really high notes, I have really high notes. If I want really low notes, I can go down and get low notes that you can barely hear. By default, we're going to have one higher instrument, one instrument in the middle, one instrument on the bottom, and drums. You can split these into what you want. You can make it so two of them are high instruments. You can make it so two of them are low instruments. You can make them all low instruments. You can mess around with that. Usually, it's pretty solid to have, your bass line, so maybe something doing some chords, and a little melody. Of course, in the world of Schroit, you don't need a music theory. It can be fun to use. It can be nice to use, but it's not required. And BeepBox is actually very accessible to people that don't know a lot of theory. So over here, we have the different scales. So by default, we're just in a pentatonic major scale here. But you could also switch to pentatonic minor. Just a smiley face or frowny face if it's major or minor. Then normal is just like your regular natural major, natural minor if you want to make something tonal. And then what most of you are going to want to do is click on expert, which just means use any note you want, right? Every note is fair game. Here for rhythm, this is more how you can subdivide your notes. So if I'm set in divided by 4, then each one of these blocks, which is like one beat or half a beat, I can put 4 notes in. Fun. If I go to 3, then now I can do triplets. So you can bounce between the two if you want to. And then, of course, 6 is just triplets, but smaller. And then 8 is if you want to get some really, really tiny, fast subdivisions. Oh, click off of that. And then you can make things very quick. Nice and speedy. You can change your tempo of your song right here. The maximum is 300, I believe. 300, you can't. Yeah, it won't let you go any higher than 300, but you don't really have to. At that point, you're going fast enough for the most part. Maybe you could use a nightcore filter on a song if you want to go even faster. All right, there are limitations to BeepBox. It's completely free, but it's super easy to use. If you want to make a note slide, just grab the note and just drag your mouse. You can drag it. You can fix it up. You can make it slide. Not as much. It's as easy as that. And certain artists like Yo-Yo Wiggins, you'll hear do a lot of slides. A trick that you'll notice a lot in Yo-Yo Wiggins are little things like this. Really quick, small slides going up. Very much a Yo-Yo Wiggins thing. So, when it comes to drums, there are a couple of different drum beats or drum types that I'd recommend for Schroit, but of course, feel free to do whatever you want. A classic is just your regular, easy, 4 to the floor kind of beat. Something like this. Pretty straightforward, it's a very simple drum beat, helps you get stuff on top of it. Another one that you'll find decently often are just continuous kind of random notes. Right? That's a drum beat. You just kind of hit random notes. The drums are not all usually as important. And then another technique that you'll hear in a lot of fliffmill that I think is important to showcase is something that I like to refer to as popcorn drums. So you do here is you get a really small subdivision. Just get a bunch of them scattered around seemingly at random. Make sure it's decently busy. And mostly higher notes here. Well, even though they're unpitched, but stuff like this. You hear that in a lot of Fliffmill's material. He's really the pioneer of that drum style. Those are the main three types of drum beats that you're going to find in a lot of Schroit. Of course, you can do all kinds of other things, but for the purpose of simplicity, I'm just going to mention these. You can change the drum, of course, by clicking on type and then changing. So standard drum set. Another one you'll hear a lot is chip noise. But standard drum set is the most common. Is the most common that you'll hear. Of course, you could do other fun stuff. But in my opinion, a lot of the other drum beats are a bit less audible. Like breathing. Can be fun. It can be fun. You can delve into all these, and of course, an important thing to mention: random generated. Randomize the drum sound. Sometimes you get some pretty good stuff from doing this. Oh, let's hear the popcorn drums. Incredible, incredible. And if you want to customize stuff, you can click Customize Instrument. You can mess around with all this, have as much fun as you want. The main tricks that I would recommend when customizing drums is consider sometimes using chorus. Just with no chorus. And if I bring chorus, it just makes it sound a bit more wide and more full. And then if you want to go to envelopes, let's say that you've got like some really loud, bombastic instruments on top of your drum beat. Go to here, change this to add one envelope, note volume, punch. It just adds a bit more initial, punch to the notes being played. Which can really help them stand out if things are a bit busier. Nice. A bit more intense. And then, of course, you can look through different instruments for all these as well. I'm not going to go into every single instrument, obviously. The main one that I'm going to want to talk about is the dubstep yoy, because the yoy is such an integral part of the world of Schroit. So, essentially, you can go through, if you want to search it faster, hit D, and it'll show you everything that starts with a D, and then eventually it'll bring you to the dubstep yoy, or you can scroll through and look through picked bass presets. And then you get this instrument. Powerful, powerful instrument. One of the downsides of the yoy is by itself, if you try to bring it in a higher melody, it can be really hard to hear. Like there, those higher notes you can barely hear, and that's because we're in C, which is like the lowest of the notes, right? If I were to try to bring this in G, a lot of it sounds silly by itself, but it can be very hard to actually make out if you have a lot more stuff going on at the same time. Just something to keep in mind. So let's make a standard little, yoy showdown kind of thing. Little fun little yoy. Very simple bass line. Pretty straightforward. And the main thing with the yoy is how customizable it is. This is something that surprised me when I was really starting to delve into customizing your instruments on BeepBox. But you can do a lot with the yoy. You can do a lot with the yoy. And I honestly, if you take anything from this tutorial, like this is where you want to focus. You can change the type of wave. So by default, the yoy uses a sawtooth wave. So if I get that going, I'll make sure it's not too loud while I talk. Switch to rounded. Oh. Noticeably different. Triangle. Most of the time, triangle waves are really hard to hear. So I don't think I've used triangle wave a single time in any Schroit that I've made. Even just in general with other, like chiptune instruments. They don't stand out as much. Square wave is pretty solid though. And the pulses are really good. 1/8 pulse, double saw, double pulse. This one is potent. Spiky. For now, let's go with double pulse. That was a fun one. There are a lot of things that you can do to then make it a bit more powerful. So if you mess around with the bit crush, it already has some bit crusher on it by default. You get a real nasty sound. Right, just messing around. You can do a lot with that. Let's stick with that for now. And this is the main thing that will really change how the yoi sounds. Is it by default has one envelope, note, filter, 1 frequency, flare 2. You can really change how the instrument sounds with this one. So that's how it normally is. That's flare 2, flare 1, flare 3. So with the flare, basically, the smaller the number, the faster it finishes the flare. But with 3, you really get that yaw. Very nice. Try twang. Twang 2. Twang 3. Go with swells. You can really change the whole way that the yoi sounds with punch. Let's go with punch for now because that's just a powerful, solid wave of yoi. Yaw, right? More of a yaw than a yoi. You kind of change what it sounds like there. Very powerful. And we haven't even looked at adding other effects on it. Add chorus. Yes! Yes! Now we're cooking. Chorus going on is super powerful. Distortion, sometimes. The main downside with distortion on a lot of instruments is that distortion can very easily just make the instrument not as noticeable. As cool as it might be. But on an instrument that's already distorted enough like this, the distortion's not really doing much. And if you want to do like echo or reverb, you can, but this is more about the sound of the actual instrument here itself. And if you want to mess with the EQ filter to really just play around with harmonics, you can have fun with that. See if I want to get that extra low kind of bass frequency going on with it, and have some fun with that. No, the yoi is probably the most important thing to know how to use. This is just one way of using the yoi, right? If you want to do something else, something that I see in a lot of fliff mil, is a lot of yois, but like scattered yois. Well, maybe not as much anymore, but it used to be a bit more common. Can be very powerful when used in the right context in a Schroit song. Make it a bit busier. Like, if you hear that in a song, I mean, you're going crazy. Oh, put that with the popcorn drums, something like that. Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, that's gonna get a listener interested. And there's all kinds of fun bass techniques that you can do. And if you ever want more instruments, you can always go to channel settings. More pitch channels adds more pitched instruments, and then drum channel will add another drum. Hit OK. Bada bim, bada boom. Now I can scroll this down if I want another bass instrument. Oh, now I've got another bass instrument. You know? And I can have all kinds of fun making a little bass line with that. Bam. Now, when it comes to other types of bass lines, we got these like regular slow ones here, right? Those can be a lot of fun, these little chaotic ones. A bass line style that I like to do a lot, something that I refer to as Nebraskan bass, because I use it a lot on my album Somewhere from Nebraska. That's really where I kind of pioneered that way of doing bass. The idea is get a bunch of random kind of notes, just going around having some fun. Just scatter a bunch of random notes, and then just pick one note, and then every time nothing is being played, play that note. So let's say I'm gonna make it this one. Okay, then every time nothing is being played, we're gonna play this. And it ends up with a really cool, interesting sounding bass line. That's awesome for Schroit. If you want to hear an example from a song that I've made, I know what's its face off somewhere from Nebraska or somewhere in Nebraska. You can hear it in Fart-Induced Sweating and Extra Sprinkles, Please, and you can also hear it off on Go Go Gorilla off of Killer of All has that one as well. I've got a couple songs with this, so you get something that sounds kind of like this. Maybe I'll get a better instrument that's like much more like audible here. Little tip: the ukulele is actually a really good instrument for bass. You just end up getting this like chaotic mess where like most of the time, it's like it likes to go back, and sometimes you can make it seem a little more chaotic. It always seems to gravitate around this, but it's like scattering around, like up and down around it. Fantastic, fantastic. Love that way of making a bass lines. Now for chords, you can, if you know how to do normal chords, you can just actually just do regular chords, right? Like I could just do like some little minor chord here because this is looking a little Phrygian-y. Something like this. Have a little fun with that. Another way of doing chords that is pretty good for Schroit. Just do 4 random notes. Now, if you are doing random notes like that, then you probably want to do the chords first and then do a bass line afterwards. And then you can just, look at like, okay, let me take the lowest notes that are being played on each of these and then get my bass to follow that. Right? So then even if these notes being played there are like wild and wacky, then, hey, at least it's all cohesive, right? And it makes these wacky chords sound less wacky because the bass line is following with it. And then if you want to add a melody to something like this and you're not sure what's going to sound good, okay, I should probably change this instrument to something else. Let's see, maybe one of the choir ones. There you go. You can always just make it do arpeggios, just make them play the same notes that are being hit in the chord. Keep in mind that these are all an octave higher. Then you get... Tell me that doesn't sound like some Schroit right now. That's right there sounds to me like some Schroit. By default, it has 4 bars selected, but you can increase that up if you want to. You can add extra bars past this, but if you're making Schroit, you probably shouldn't, because that might make your song a bit long. You rarely are you gonna get to the end of this if you're making Schroit. But then, of course, you can do other stuff. You don't have to hit those notes. You could do a fun little melody where you're kind of, doing a little chromatic crawl. Oh, well, something like that, maybe? There you go. Sounds like Schroit. Sounds like Schroit. Of course, you can customize all these other instruments as well. One thing with customization for the chords that I would say keep in mind the most would be chord type. By default, most instruments are simultaneous, but based off which instrument you're modifying, it can be different. So simultaneous essentially just means every note from the chord is happening at the same time. But you can change that. If you do strum, they will play really quickly, but in the order that you hit them. It's a bit less audible with all the other things there. Let me just Ba-ba. Wah, wah. It's not like all happening exactly at the same time. And then arpeggio. This one is the one you want to keep in mind. Instead of playing all the notes simultaneously at any point, they just constantly bounce between all the different notes. And it sounds a little hectic and very fun. So then with all those together with that. So depending on what you're going for, that might be like the perfect vibe for what you want. And of now, most of my Schroit songwriting, I usually always have all the instruments doing something at the same time. But you know, you'll also see artists that will have parts where, you know, you'll bounce between, right? So maybe we'll have a little chord going on here, and then we'll get a, you know, then maybe the lead melody will have some fun, and then you get the bass coming in. Oh. Who knows? And then maybe you'll get a little drum going on the whole time. Hit some random notes. Something like that, right? If you want a good example of that, I'd recommend listening to Trinity Deluxe. It's one of my older albums, but the entire album is like that, where all the instruments are bouncing between each other. And there's only, I think there's like one song at the end where they all come together, but they're all just bouncing around between each other. So that's like most of the main stuff that I would suggest, right? So mess around with the yoi. Keep in mind these types of drum beats, your fun little like regular 4-to-the-floor beats, your kind of random but coherent drum beats, and then your popcorn drums. Classics. Nebraskan bass is not something, obviously not something you have to do. It's just something I thought I'd show because it could, you know, maybe you'll find use out of it. How to use random chords, melodies, all that fun stuff. You know, that's about all that I could really show here that'd be super useful. I mean, yeah, you can mess around with your tempo if you want it to be faster. I'd recommend picking the tempo before you write. But you know, you can make things a little bit faster, you can make it a little slower. And actually, one last really important thing. When you export your song, do not keep outro checked. If outro is checked, it will include all of the blank spaces after it. And you probably don't want to do that, because that used to be a problem in the early days of Schroit, and that was bad. The first time it happened by accident, hilarious. Super funny, 20 seconds of silence after a song, oh haha, funny. When artists started doing it on purpose, I won't get into it. It was a bad time. But yeah, so hopefully you guys have learned a lot from this, and hopefully you'll be able to use this knowledge to create even greater Schroit in the future. Thank you all for watching. Remember to join the Discord, follow Schroit Worldwide on Instagram, subscribe, and have an awesome day. Mint Miracle out.